This video is going to be talking about the basics of glass fusion. The first thing you need to remember is safety. You always want to wear glasses, whether they be protective glasses or your prescription glasses. Well, while you're working, try to remember not to touch your face because there'll be little pieces of glass on your hand. And then when you're all done for the day, you want to clean your hands with soap and water at the sink. The type of glass we're using is COE 96. It's fusible glass. It fuses at 1250 to 1450 degrees Fahrenheit. It's just a physical change of the glass. We're not going to chemically change. It's a scientific process of just physical change of glass. So we purchase glass in full sheets, fusible glass, and then we can cut the glass down to different sizes. And we have it in a medium-sized containers or smaller pieces of different colors when you're looking for colors for your design or your project, and even into smaller pieces. Tools we're going to need are the glass cutter. That's going to score your glass. The running pliers, they're going to break the glass after it's been scored. And then if the piece is too small, you might need, or you want a smaller piece, you can use the glass nippers to cut pieces off. When you use the glass nippers, part of safety is that you do it in the bag so it doesn't go to another area or bounce away. Okay, so to score the glass, so you know where to cut it, you can't do a real wavy line. You have to do a gradual line. You want to push down, this little tip goes up and down. You push down so that it's perpendicular to the table, and you push. You never want to go over it again. I didn't quite get to the end, but that's okay. The running pliers, it'll run the rest of the way. Okay, so these are the running pliers, and you'll see that it's marked top. There's a little line in here. You need to match that line. It's not like a regular pliers where you're going to bend and break it. There's a line there. That line needs to be lined up with your score mark. And then you just pinch. And it breaks the piece in half, or on the score line. You do need like a curvy piece or oval shape. You can draw ahead and then try and get close to that. I'm going to keep that tool perpendicular, and I'm going to spin. I have to be careful. The glass is sharp. Remember safety. But I can't just use the running pliers to break this once it's been made. I have to make little score marks out from it and break it many times. So I shouldn't have probably started. I might want to cut that piece off first so I don't break that piece. And pinwheel all the way around it. And then with my running pliers, I'm going to break that one piece first so I save that bigger piece. And then I'm going to break all the way around those pieces to get a circle shape. Now right here it didn't quite break. That's when we would use the glass nippers if we needed to. But if it's going to be a total fuse, it'll melt and round off anyway. So that'll work for that. Another part of safety is that you don't want to sweep your hand across all these little pieces of frit. You want to sweep them out of the way with a little broom or a paper towel, something to get them out of your way. Okay, we're going to use the glass nippers. They're going to be cutting here. If you make a line, you don't have to score it. If it's a small piece like this, the nippers will cut right on that line. I get it marked here, but I don't cut it until I get it, for safety reasons, into the bag, and then I can just plier them together. And then the piece I need, I can take out. The piece I don't need can get put in the small container. It also, when you're thinking about your composition, you want to think of what size. You're not going to want to take a piece this big for a necklace. The person would walk around all hunched over carrying that around. So you want to think about what size you want for your composition. okay, when you're creating. So the types of things you can add when you're creating your composition, there are different things. You can use the scrap pieces. There's transparent glass if you look for it. That might add a nice interest piece, and if it's too big, remember you can use the glass nippers in the plastic bag, or if you find a piece you really like, you know, you don't need to do anything to it. It'll melt down and smooth out when we get to the fusing part of it. There are also noodles. Think of Alfredo noodles that you can use, and I'll show you how to measure those. There's stringers. Think of like spaghetti stringers. There's dots. Think of an odd number with your composition, 1 or 3. The most probably 5 dots with your composition, unless you're doing something symmetrical. And then you don't have to use any or all of these things, but you can also use at frit in the very bottom of containers. You might find some frit. And frit is teeny tiny little pieces of glass. That's the glass you don't want to slide away. So when I use that broom to sweep, that was frit. We save that. We save every piece of glass for people to use, to sprinkle on. And that's just towards the end. You would do that very last. So when I use a noodle, I want to measure out, and noodles can just be snapped with your fingers where you want it. And again, the little pieces that broke off become frit, can get put into the frit container or kept. Stringers, you can measure, and those also can just be snapped with your fingers what length you want it to be. And just think about your composition, think about the rule of thirds, color combination. I'm probably not going to put transparent red on this, it won't show up. If you look at this one, this has black on top of that maroon, and it doesn't show up hardly at all. That would have been better if that dot would have been maybe white. Would have made it show up better. Think about colors next to each other on the color wheel. They make a good composition or color choices. Adding a neutral color like white, or even some just tans. This is getting a little too big for a necklace, but it's not too bad for about the largest you'd want to go. After you have your design planned out, you need to clean off your pieces, and we'll talk about cleaning them in just a second. But before that, you need to decide if you're going to do a contour fuse, where the pieces are just going to be tacked together using the heat in the kiln, or if you're going to do a full fuse. Now, contour fuse, you just need 1 layer of glass, and probably up to 4 would be the highest that you could maybe go on there. And it'll melt and round things off. Notice that it's not quite a square anymore, it's rounded corners. That's contour fuse. And some other examples of contour fuse is contour fuse. You can see those different thicknesses. Or if you decide to do full fuse, then you need a piece of clear glass behind the same size. So you have 2 layers of glass, and then you have your other designs on top. So the difference between full fuse, you can see that the piece is melted, it kind of bubbles out on the side. These are the exact same things. One just was contour fused, one was full fused, and full fused needs that second piece of glass under it when you make it. Okay, so you have your design made, how your composition you want it to be. Hopefully you've done some planning on a piece of paper before you get started a little bit, thinking about your plan. Things do change while you're creating because the glass shape can inspire you to do something different. So you want to remember how you had your composition and take your pieces off. With a Q-tip, you're going to use some rubbing alcohol and dip your Q-tip in it, and you need to clean all the surfaces. I found that if you don't clean the surfaces and you don't glue the pieces, they kind of pop and move around in the kiln. The oils from your hands and anyone else's hands that's touched the pieces, they kind of roll. It's hard to do the stringers, but try and do them the best you can. And then don't leave that inside the alcohol, just lay it on top or beside so that it doesn't keep soaking up all the rubbing alcohol. Then glue, I've just put a little bit of glue on a container or the lid of your container at school. And using a toothpick, it doesn't take much. It just takes a tiny little bit of glue. And that way it's just getting it from your hand-in paper to the kiln. Too much glue, it's going to, could leave burn marks. Now that sticks off a little bit, but that'll just melt over the top. Again, if I want this to be full fused, I will have to have a clear piece of glass that same size underneath, and I would also glue that down. I'm not sure where I want this, so I'm going to put the glue on that piece. And it needs a little balance, so I'm going to put this up at the top. This kind of looks square, but when it's fired, if it's contour fused, it'll kind of round itself out like the dot did in the end. So things don't always stay the exact same as you want. Oh, and if you'd want some frit on your piece of work at this point, once it's been glued, you'd want to get, I think your school has liquid hairspray, it's just cheap liquid hairspray. You want to put that where you want it to go, where you want the frit, and then pick up your frit, and you can sprinkle it on. It just can add little specks of color to your composition with the hairspray. And the hairspray is just to get it from your workspace to the kiln. Okay, so one of the cool things you can do with the stringer, the ones that are like a spaghetti noodle, is you can heat them with the supervision and help of your teacher or an adult. You can heat the stringer, and using pliers or something, it'll bend, and you can twist it or make a coil, let that cool just a little bit, reheat another spot, it'll bend. And if it's a little curvy, it will flatten out in the kiln when it heats up to fuse. So you just need to hold that till it cools, and then clean it with your rubbing alcohol, and then figure out where you want that to go. That might be interesting to add a little bit of that to the composition. Then this would get turned in. Decide which way you want as top. When you turn it in, that would be where you would want the bail if you're making a necklace. If you're doing a magnet, it can go on any direction. That doesn't matter so much. Other things that you can make with it besides necklaces are magnets. That could be a magnet or a necklace. Little scenes. And insects. Insects are a little more planning involved, because you have to have, it's got to be a full fuse because the wire gets fused in. We'd fuse it flat, and then you'd bend the legs of the wire. To be careful, that should have had another piece of clear over the top to help hold that all together when it got built. So think about your composition.